Hi, everyone. I'm Silviu. Um, I'm a software developer at Adobe, and today my presentation is about building uh, accessible dropdowns using the Downshift React Hooks API. So a little bit about myself. I'm a software developer at Adobe, and I started to use Downshift when I was working at Microsoft's Fluent UI component library, to be more specific. For Microsoft Teams, we had to build what we called a people picker, where you could just pick people in order to start a chat with. And that people picker was actually more or less a multiple selection combo box. So we went ahead and used Downshift for that. And we customized it a little bit to fit our needs. And afterwards, we contributed back to Downshift with a few improvements. And finally, I became the primary maintainer for the library. And that's where the actual fun started, because we started the transition of the API from a React component to the React hooks. So a little bit about these React hooks. So Downshift started as a component. It still is a component. So you could use both Downshift or the hooks. We encourage you to use the hooks actually because they're newer. But I wanted to give a little bit of overview of why we transitioned to hooks. So Downshift as a component didn't render anything on your screen. It would give you the means you would require to build your dropdowns using whatever UI you wanted to use. So you could have used, any UI library like Material UI or React Spectrum or Fluent UI. You could have used style components if that's what you wanted. You could have used plain HTML. That was what made and makes Downshift different. It's based on the inversion of control principle. So you're in control of your own UI. Downshift will just give you the logic to have all your basic building blocks transformed into a fully functional and accessible dropdown, be it as a combo box or as a select. So today, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to build first a custom select component using the hook use select, and we're going to introduce the state and getter props. Then we're going to build a custom combo box component. And finally, we're going to add multiple selection to the select. Furthermore, we're going to deep dive into some more advanced API features of Downshift, like the control props, the state reducer, and the action props. And finally, we'll do a recap of all of these. And all of these is a lot. So let's actually get into it. So then close this. So in my browser, I have my building blocks for the UI. So I have a text, I have a button, and I have a list of items. And I want to turn this into a fully accessible select. And since it's a list of countries, this can be considered a country picker for, I don't know, a travel website. You could just pick your citizenship. So that's that. We're going to use today Chakra UI components, basic components to build our select. So we're going to use the button for the toggle button, the text for the label, a list with list items. I chose Chakra because it was already styled and it was pretty easy to work with these components. So that worked for me. So how are we going to build our select from these building blocks? Well, let's actually first call use select after we are importing it from Downshift. And we are going to call use select with a couple of properties. We're going to pass items, which in our case are the countries, and then we're going to pass this item to string function. And we are also going to put a parameter here because our items are of type country. This item to string, let me go to countries. So most of the time, your items will be objects, and we need to know the string value for each item for some accessibility purposes that I'm going to show you later. And from use select, I'm going to get a couple of things. First of all, I need to know the state of my UI. So I'm going to get the state props, and there are 3 props for this. I'm going to grab is open, highlighted index, and selected item. Okay, and let me do some resizing over here. Great. So these 3 state properties are going to describe my state of the select at any time. So for instance, I want to render the country's items only when the dropdown is open, obviously. So I'm going to do this. And once I'll save, boom, my countries are gone. But I want to show the list as well when clicking the toggle button. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's say that there is no use select. What you want to do is add a click handler to that button, and once the user clicks, you will show the items, and vice versa. When the items are shown, you want to hide them. That's what actually use select does under the hood. It's just that it keeps its logic hidden from you. It will just give you that click handler already, and it will give you a bunch of handlers for the toggle button and for the menu and for other elements in your UI as well. And it will give you these things by using the getter props. So the second thing that we are going to get from use select. So I'm going to get the get toggle button props, the get label props, the get menu props, and the get item props. So I don't know what these, as a consumer of use select, I don't know what these return, but I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to be event handlers, ARIA attributes, HTML attributes, refs for focus logic. But let's say that I'm oblivious, so I'm just going to do this. I'm going to call on the text, which will act as my label. I'm going to call the get label props, and I'm going to destructure the result on the element. And I'm going to do the same thing with get toggle button props on my button, like so. The menu on the list, and the get item props on each of my list item. And here I'm going to pass a couple of things, the item and the index, so we know what item are we talking about. Oh, and an important thing to know, realize that I'm always keeping this list element in my UI, even when my dropdown is closed. This is very important for accessibility. This is very important for accessibility, and this should always be in the DOM. So I'm going to save this. I'm going back to my app, and once I click, then my dropdown opens. On escape, I'm going to close it and realize that, okay, I'm moving mouse. I'm also hitting up and down arrow, and nothing's happening. Well, this is due to the inversion of control. You have power of UI, but you also have the responsibility of taking care of your UI. So we're going to use the highlighted index, and we're going to do this. On the list item, I'm going to put a background color if my index is the same as highlighted index. If so, then I'm going to put light blue. Otherwise, oops, get rid of this. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it as undefined. Format, great. And I'm going to do something else. I'm going to put a font weight. So when I'm selecting an item, I'm still keeping it in my list, but I want to make it bold so it is clear visually that this item is selected. So I'm going to say if selected item is this item, then the font weight will be bold. Otherwise, undefined. And I'm going to use the selected item further. On my button, I'm always saying countries, but if I already have an item selected, I need to show that item. So I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to check if I have a selected item, then I'm going to show the string version of that item. Otherwise, I'm going to show countries. I'm going to save, refresh. So I'm going to click the label now. It will open and voila, my highlighted index is light blue. I can move upwards, downwards. I can also move with shift and we'll go from 5 to 5 index-wise. I can also use character keys. I can say row, and there we go, Romania. And I selected it, and the text appears on the bottom. I can also say United Arab Emirates. I want to say United States. So that works as well. So our select is accessible so far. So what we did in this case, we used Chakra UI basic components for our UI to build the select. So we used a button, a text, and the list. And we used the declarative part of the API, the state and getter props, in order to, so we used the getter props, we called them, and we got back what these getter props return for each element, which, as I mentioned, there are HTML attributes, event handlers, and so on. And we also use the state props to update the UI according to the state of the select. Now let's move further to a combo box. So the main thing with Combobox is not keeping all the items of a dropdown in the front end at the same time. You want to fetch items from the server based on what the user has already typed. So that is why in this case, we have get countries now, which is an async function giving us a list of countries based on the search query. And the UI is similar, but a little bit different. Now our toggle button is an icon button, and we also introduced an input wrapped in a flex. So let me put this combo box on the screen so you can see what's going on. Awesome. So here it is. So all good so far. I'm going back to my combo box, and instead of use select, I'm going to use combo box because it's a different hook. And realize that I have no error whatsoever in my code because the API is pretty similar between use select and use combo box. However, I'm going to grab a couple of more things from use combo box, which is the get input props and the get combo box props. So the input, I'm going to call in the structure on the input as well as expected. And the get combo box props, I'm going to call in the structure on this wrapping flex. And why am I doing this? ARIA 1.1 specification clearly states that the input needs to be wrapped in an element with the role of combo box. And I think in ARIA 1.2, they changed this. And the role combo box, among other things, are going directly on the input without the need of this wrapping thing, which probably makes more sense. But right now we're still sticking to ARIA 1.1. We are going to move obviously to ARIA 1.2 specs in the future, but right now these are the guidelines. We are going to stick to them. But now we have an issue. We need to have actual items, and we are going to get them from this on input value change prop that we are going to pass um, to the use combo box hook. And the on input change will be called with input value. Oops. Spent, fixed it. So we now have another state prop, which is called input value, which is whatever the user is typing in the input. And use combo box already knows what we are typing in the input because of, well, you guessed it, get input props. And each time the input value will change, so this will be new input value to make more sense. So each time the input value state will change, the on input value change will get called. And here we're going to get countries with the new input value. And this is async, so we'll do it then. This will return new items. Items, you need to spell that correctly. And these are country array and arrow function. And with these new items, we're going to put set items as new items, and they will end in the state value of items, which is passed to use combo box, and we are also using them to render list items. So I think we're good to go. So if I type here RO, I'm only getting the countries starting with row, which incidentally is Romania. I'm going to escape. So I cleared everything. Let's say RAR, it's Argentina. Great. Let's do another one. That Zimbabwe. I don't know. So, and we can also use the toggle button, obviously, because we have it. It's not needed, but it's so it's an optional element, the toggle button, in the case of the combo box, since you can already open the input with up and down arrows. But it's a nice thing to have when users rely on mouse mostly. So to sum up for the combo box, the UI was mostly a copy paste of the previous UI. But now we restyled the toggle button. We now have an icon button, sorry. And we also added an input wrapped in a container. And on that container, we called in destructured get combo box props, which among others contain the role of combo box. And the input, we called in destructured the get input props. And now we are getting the values of the items from an async function called on input value change. Let's also add a multiple selection to, let's actually do it on the select. So here I have the UI of the single selection select, but we also have the UI for our tag list, which will represent the selected items. So we are grabbing tags from Chakra, obviously, and we are going to have a tag label and a tag close button. So let me render this on the screen. I'm going to render it here, multiple select. Save this, here it is, nothing changed. So let's make multiple selection here. So I'm going to call, this is the third downshift hook from the API called use multiple selection. And I'm going to pass it item to string again. And I'm going to get from it the selected items because it keeps them in the state. And I'm going to remove them from here. Let me also add a type. The items are type country. Great. TypeScript loves us. We're going to get a couple of getter props, which are the get dropdown props and get selected item props. And we're going to get a couple of action props. We're not going to talk about them now, but in a bit. So it'll be add selected item and remove selected item. Great. And we're going to use get dropdown props on the toggle button. So we need the get dropdown props also have some event handlers of its own, and we need to combine those with the get toggle button props from use select. And we're going to do that by passing it as an argument to get toggle button props, like so. And here we're going to pass this prevent key action with the value of this open, because I don't want my navigation between toggle button and the items while I have the menu open. And we'll see that how that works in a bit. Oh, and on the tag close button, I'm going to stop the propagation. And I'm also going to remove selected item, this selected item. But how are we going to add selected items? Well, we're going to use on selected item change on use select. But first of all, I need use select to be clear on the idea that I am handling the selected items right now through use multiple selection. So selected item doesn't need to care about, so use select doesn't need to care about the selected item anymore. So I'm going to control the selected item to always be null. And here, I'm going to grab the selected item. So I'm going first to check if it's truly the new selected item. And if so, I'm going to add it to the selection of use multiple selection using add selected item. And we didn't call the get selected item props. This needs to be called on each tag. This is similar to get item props from use select or use Combobox. We're going to call it with index and selected item. Great. So back to our UI. I'm going to open. I'm going to select I don't know, Anguilla. It's selected. Let's select a few more. Let's select this, Romania. And now on arrow left, my focus moved to Romania, then on Virgin Islands, then Anguilla. Right moves in the opposite direction, and finally back to the toggle button. And I can also remove, so I just click. The focus is on the tag. So, and this will receive on backspace or delete, it will remove the selected item from selection. So Virgin Islands, I'm hitting delete. The focus back goes to Anguilla. I'm going to backspace this, and the focus goes on the countries. Brilliant. Okay, and also clicking on the close icon will still work because I have this handler over here on click with remove selected item, which is great. So to sum up, for multiple selection, the UI was mostly, again, a copy of paste of the single selection select, but now we're controlling from use select, we are controlling the selected item to be null. So, and we are using the third downshift hook of use multiple selection to handle the selected items for us. And those selected items will be shown in our UI using the tag list component from Chakra. Now let's do something else in our combo box. Let's say I want to control a state value for some reason. So let's say I want to control the selected item. Let's presume that our scenario is something like this. I have an API call that returns after a few seconds, and the API call is to a cache, and we want to update the value of the combo box with that value from cache, but we don't want to wait for it. We want to show the UI immediately. So let's control the selected item here. I'm going to use a React use state with selected item, and set selected item will be a React use state, which will be of type country or null, and we'll initialize it with the value of null. We'll stop getting the selected item from use combo box, and instead we're going to add it as a prop. So now we're in control.
Silviu, would you mind zooming in a little bit more if possible? I think some of the attendees are having a little bit of trouble seeing still.
Is this better?
Thank you.
Great. Sorry, it's already pretty zoomed in. Okay, so coming back to my UI, if I'm going to select Algeria, then you can see that my selected item has gone because well, it's always null. So we need to grab in order to do a full control prop scenario, we need to grab the suggested value from Downshift of the selected item and update our selected item with that value. And we're going to do that on selected item change. And here is the selected item. So Eve, which is the new selected item. Great. So, whoops. Fixed it. So here we're going to do if the new selected item is not undefined. Okay, I'm going to set the selected item to be the new selected item, and this will do a classic controlled prop of a React component. So we're controlling the selected item of our combo box. If I'm going to pick Algeria, so you see nothing happens. But what I wanted to show you is this call from the imaginary API. So it will be done in a React use effect. And I'm going to call this effect only at mount. So let's say that after 3 seconds, I want to, let's say that my cache API returns with countries of 10. I don't know. This is a pretty contrived example, but just to show you that you can control the value of a selected item or any other state prop in the Downshift hooks as you would in any other React component that has state. So if I refresh this and I'm going to wait 3 seconds, then I get Argentina, which is probably the 10th country in that list. So for control props, these should work the same as any other component that involves state in React. And you can control any of the select any of the state properties of the hooks in Downshift, like in a similar way. Let's go to the state reducer. So let's say that I want to customize the behavior of my select over here a little bit. So I'm going to select Anguilla, and if I'm going to press arrow down, it will open the menu. It will go to the index of the item that is selected, +1 or -1 if I hit arrow up. I want to change this behavior to match the one in Windows. I want the menu to always be closed, and on arrow down, I want directly Antarctica to be closed. So let's do that with a state reducer, because we don't actually need to control any values for this scenario. So the state reducer is also a prop called with state and action and changes. Okay. And we are going to grab from action and changes two things. We're going to grab type and changes, and we're going to return changes. So what is going on here? State reducer, if we pass it as a prop, this function will get called before the state changes in Downshift. And it will get called with the previous state, and it will get called with the type of the change that caused this state change. And it will also be called with the changes proposed by Downshift as a consequence of this state change. So here we need to check the type if it's use select dot state change types dot toggle button arrow down. So in this case, I want to return something else. I want to return is open to be false, because I always want to keep my dropdown closed in this scenario. Then the highlighted index there's no point for this since the dropdown's closed anyway. And I want to select the item that was on that highlighted index suggested by Downshift. And I'm going to say selected item to be the countries of changes dot highlighted index, or if it was opened and there was no item selected, it will be 0. And I'm going to do the same thing, actually a similar thing with the toggle button arrow up, only this time, if there was no selection, I want to select the last element. So it'll be countries dot length -1. So with our cute little state reducer in place, let's check if it works. I'm hitting arrow down, and boom, Antarctica is selected. I can do this, and I have the same behavior as a Windows select. This is arrow up. And all the other behaviors stay the same, because in the other cases, I'm returning the changes proposed by Downshift. So that's working as expected. And also, I'm not sure if I've shown this, but if you would type row, row, it will select this by the default. This is another accessibility feature of use select. So for the state reducer, we are using it to customize the state depending on our use case without explicitly using control props. We didn't need to in this case. The state reducer is super nice. You can control any, you can customize any state, any next state, as long as that state comes from is actually a state that will trigger a new change in downshift. So for instance, this will not get called if I'm just focusing the toggle button. This is not a state change, it will not get called. Last but not least, I want to show the more imperative side of the API of Downshift. So in my combo box, I want by clicking a button, this is the button, on clicking this, I want to reset the state of my combo box. And I'm going to use this reset function, which I'm going to get from use combo box. So we generally encourage people to use the declarative side of the API, but sometimes you just need to set some state. And this is the escape hatch we have. So let's see how this works. We're going to wait 3 seconds for Argentina, and we can reset the state already by hitting escape while our input is focused. But maybe we want to improve the experience for mouse users, and they can click on this button and the click handler will get called and the reset function from use combo box will get called. So now we have a reset of the state of the combo box. And these two buttons don't need to be in tab order. So if I tab, we can see that the focus goes away from these buttons. These are not in a tab order because I can already use the up and down arrows to open the menu, so I don't actually need the toggle button to do this, and I can also reset the state using escape. So we can just remove these from the tab order and give, even if we make them buttons, we can put a tab index of -1 to them. So that was the action props. It's the imperatives API to explicitly set the state. It's the escape hatch that you might require to explicitly set the state of the hook. As I said, we encourage you to use the declarative API with the state props and the getter props. But and the props passed to downshift, obviously. But if it's not possible, then this is your escape hatch. So what we talked about today, we talked about what makes downshift different. And it's because what makes downshift different is that it doesn't render anything. You are in control of what you render. You can use whatever UI you want. Maybe you already have a design system with components, with basic components already implemented. You can use downshift hooks to have your heap of building block of components and make a select out of them, or a combo box. We did both today, and we also had a multiple select. We didn't go through the multiple combo box because that was the same as the multiple select. You just need to apply get dropdown props to the input and not the toggle button. And we also took a deeper dive into the control props, the state reducer, and the action props. And well, I think that's pretty much it. So if there are any questions, please.
That was awesome. Thanks so much, Silviu, and really great job. We do have about 10 minutes left for questions, and we have a couple that came in. So let's go ahead and dive in. The most upvoted question was, what is the screen reader experience like? Does it announce how many items? And does it need ARIA Live or roll alert?
Good question. Let's see. Just a second. So we are using ARIA Live region at the moment to announce when the combo box is open and how many items we have. So I'm opening. So I'm on the select right now, and I'm going to open it. So it announces that my selection, Romania, is 180 of 240, I don't know how many. And if I'm going to select, so not only we use an ARIA live region for two purposes. One, to announce how many items there are in the select or in the combo box once it's open. And second, when you selected something, it will tell you what you selected. And also on the multiple selection, I think it will announce when you have an item removed. That's also ARIA Live region. We took this from a jQuery implementation, I think, of Combobox. It was way back when Downshift was first developed by Ken C. Dodds, and he used that for inspiration, the jQuery example. I'm not sure exactly where it is right now.
Thank you. Another question, what problems does this package solve and why is it better than regular React components?
Good question. So this is, I think I mentioned it once or twice. So when you have a regular component, you need to style it according to your needs. With Downshift, you are using the components you already have. You're using the buttons you already have into your web app. You're using the lists that you already have. So for instance, if your website is based on the components from Chakra UI, you can use Downshift to to build your select combo box or use multiple selection with the components you already use. You don't need to grab another component, restyle it to match the design of your Chakra UI, and continue to um, uh, sorry, to change the styles. If the Chakra UI changes, then you need to change the styles you added to your component. With Downshift and the fact that you're reusing the components you already have, you don't need to do that. The button updates, the style of the button updates, you get that update immediately to your select as well.
Great. Another question, what challenges have you faced as a maintainer of Downshift?
Oh, well, for instance, there was once, so I was working on use select, and it was actually the first hook that I wanted to release. And there was this other developer that one day just posted on as an issue, hey, I just rewrote Downshift as a hook. Here it is. And he disappeared. And I was like, uh-oh, I need to do something about it. So I thought, what am I going to do? Should I leave my work? Because my work was probably a little bit different. Should I use his work? That was a tough decision for me to make. I tried to reach out and get his feedback and help to work on my idea of a solution, which was a hook for each drop-down version. So a hook for select, a hook for combo box, a hook for multiple selection. I thought that this API was way much better than using a single hook or a single component and customize it for combo box, select, and multiple selection. So that was probably the first challenge because it involved decision making, and I was pretty anxious to be honest. But it went out okay. We still managed to get these hooks out, and well, there are many challenges. This was like a particular challenge for me, but generally there are a lot of challenges in maintaining library. Like, how do you develop yourself? How do you encourage your users to develop for you? So I actually like to get issues on my on Downshift on the repo, but if you could also put a pull request to solve your own issue, I'll be even happier. So that's what I'm trying to encourage. Also, this is my least favorite, doing infrastructure stuff. So everything from releasing to testing to building. Any changes in here, I'm still new to this, and every time I need to do it, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for me, but I'm getting better at it, and I should be, because one of the plans I have, probably the greatest plan, is to move these hooks to a monorepo. So that involves a lot of infrastructure, and yeah, it'll be fun.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for maybe just one more question. This one just recently got uploaded a couple times. Someone saying, can you give a real quick tour of the Downshift docs to show how someone would reference the key features you've just demoed? Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. I have them right here. So this is the Downshift repo. This is where the bulk of our documentation lies. The first page is on the Downshift component, but there are separate pages for each hook. So really, you should go to this as well. But first, the Downshift docs are at downshift-js.com. And for these hooks, there is this hooks menu item. And for each hook, we have the most relevant usage examples. So this is the basic usage with basic HTML components. Then I also did the material UI for funsies, just to show that you can use whatever UI library that you want. Look, there's also an example for controlling states. So I'm selecting Curium here, and both the dropdowns got updated. And also, for each of these examples, there is a code sandbox link. And this is actually another repo, which is the Downshift examples repo. And this contains more example of usages than on the doc site. And you can also have like the code sandbox to play with them even better. You can fork this, and you can also use this to post issues. It's way better to have a code sandbox that demos your issue, so we can repro it faster. So definitely look at these three things. Start at the docs, go to the Downshift examples for more examples, and for the documentation and any other theory, it's the GitHub repo.
Awesome.
That is it.
Thank you so much, Silviu. It looks like we are at time here, so that will conclude our session for today. I want to thank you again for a great presentation, and to thank everyone for attending.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.